Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
Kerry Clack, columnist, editorial board member.
Metro editor Greg Jefferson.
Nancy Pryor-Johnson, associate editorial board editor.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about today. Before we get into, the news here in San Antonio, I wanted to mention to anyone who hasn't seen it that Kerry was the keynote speaker at last week's Martin Luther King Jr. March in San Antonio. And he gave a fantastic speech, which is available for viewing on our Express News YouTube channel. And I won't get into a lot of details about it because I think you really need to see it and hear it yourself. But I think he really gets into what MLK was really all about, and the way he's sort of co-opted, or there are politicians attempting to co-opt him and his legacy. Once a year, and anyway, I encourage everyone to watch that. About 6 months ago, if you'd asked me, I would have said that this coming municipal election in San Antonio was probably going to be kind of a quiet, maybe even boring one. You had, I think, just about every seat had an incumbent planning to run again who was not term limited out. The mayor, Ron Nirenberg, he looks like he's going to cruise to a fourth term. And in that time, things have gotten kind of interesting. We've seen two council incumbents, Clayton Perry and Mario Bravo, get censured for their behavior. Clayton Perry's, facing legal trouble over the hit and run accident that we've talked about on this podcast. And we've had the Justice Charter Coalition come forward with, looks like they're going to be able to get a charter amendment on the ballot, which would ban chokeholds and no-knock warrants and decriminalize abortion, and also encourage or require that police officers not arrest someone for small possessions amounts of marijuana. So that's, I think, also going to affect the nature of the race. But the big news which we got last week is that District 7 Councilwoman Anna Sandoval, who got the highest percentage of the vote of any council incumbent in both 2019 and 2021, has announced that she will not seek another term and is actually leaving office at the end of this month to take a job with the University Health System doing research into health equity issues. And this is really, we've had an immediate rush to run for whether it's going to be an open seat, and it's really a two-track process. We're going to have an appointment process to fill the remainder of this term, and then we're going to have an open seat in May. Greg, what was your first reaction when this was something that I think was a surprise to a lot of people in San Antonio?
Oh yeah, no, it was a surprise to me. The rumor had been around for months.
Yeah.
But after a while, it seemed like, okay, well, this is not going to happen. The timing of it totally makes sense. She announced right before the opening of candidate filing, which was last Wednesday. So clearly she's clearing the deck. She's saying, I'm out. And if you step back, it makes a lot of sense. Anna Sandoval is not someone who enjoyed the hurly-burly of City Hall. The back and forth, the compromises. She was very policy minded, and I think she was effective kind of in that sphere. But the kind of nitty gritty of politics was just she never really caught into it. She never really enjoyed it like some council members do. I think they like the back and forth, the give and take of politics. I think Manny Pelaez always kind of comes to mind.
There's a happy warrior thing, and I think I don't think the battle is necessarily enjoyable to her.
Right. And it was, so she's got a baby. I mean, she's got an infant. That's a ton of work. Very little sleep you get in the first year. So she's tired. She's grieving. She's still dealing with the death of her father over a year ago. She's helping her mom. She's got a newborn. She's got a council job whereas she's been effective, and she's had really good constituent service. I think it reached the point where it was just weighing on her too much, and then you throw on that the verbal assault of Mario Bravo against her back in September. This is a former romantic partner of hers. And I think it just became, you add that to the mix, it's all just too much. So it makes sense. So, her announcement coming when it did made sense. It was very orderly. And she sets up what's, a race for an open seat. And I think everybody has made clear, including Anna Sandoval, that they want whoever the interim appointee is in District 7 to be committed to not running for the seat.
And along those lines, we had an immediate name come forward for the appointment. And this is Rosie Castro, who, a legendary figure in San Antonio, the mother of Julian and Joaquin Castro, someone who was a political activist, ran for city council on the Committee for Barrio Betterment slate in 1971 when she was 23 years old. And she also is someone who has known Anna for, Anna went to high school with the twins. So Rosie's known her for a long time. At Anna's kickoff for her first campaign in 2017, Rosie was there speaking on her behalf and has always been a great big champion of hers. So the things that Anna wanted were, to be able to keep her staff intact. Whoever gets the appointment keeps the staff intact for the rest of this term. And someone who's not going to run in May. Rosie has already said she's not going to run in May. Nancy, I mean, when it happened, it all made sense. I mean, immediately when Rosie Castro's name came forward, it all made sense that she would be someone who could fill that term. But it's at the same time. I mean, prior to all this happening, it's not something we would have thought about. I mean, what was your reaction to that?
Yeah, when I first saw it, I was a little surprised. I think Elaine Ayala had a really good column about it and said it's a natural choice, right? I mean, she's from the West Side. She's well known. She's a fighter. She fights for the people of the West Side. So, I mean, I think all of those and also her relationship with Anna, I think is really important too. I don't think she would do a bad job. Everything points to her doing a good job, and it's a short time as well. And then we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah, it seems to me that I mean, one of the people who I think we're going to be talking about, who's looking like an early front runner possibly in that District 7 race in the election race, is Marina Gavito, who she's been the director of SA Digital Connect. She's worked with at Rackspace USAA, founding director of Tech Block. She's the daughter of Joe Alderete, who was a council member from 77 to 85, worked closely with Henry Cisneros when Henry Cisneros was mayor. And she jumped into the race immediately. And she has stated that she supports the idea of an appointment going to someone who's not going to run in May, which it seems very clear that she's going to focus on the election. And I'm not saying everyone's going to clear the field for Rosie for the appointment, but I think the major candidates that we're probably going to see in the election are probably going to say, I'm going to concentrate on that, and I'm not going to. I don't know. There's any benefit to seeking the appointment now, trying to get 3 or 4 months on the council. When you have that kind of if you plan to run in May, especially when you got Rosie Castro as an opponent.
Yeah,
I don't know that that's a good idea.
If Rosie wasn't an opponent, I think the case could be made for getting in there and making a name for yourself and saying, "Look what I already did."
That's right.
So I mean, you had that. I mean, so you've got a known quantity in Rosie Castro. You've got a majority of council. Just about. I don't think our reporters have talked to a council member who said, "You know what? I'm totally open to having an appointee also run for the seat at the same time." Yeah. Nobody says that. So I think once. And by the way, so Mayor Nirenberg is being weird about the starting of this. Like, we're hearing very little. I would have thought we would have heard something by now. Yeah, no details about how they're actually going to, when they're going to start the appointee process, like, and how it's going to play out. So hopefully this week we'll get those details. But I can't imagine that wouldn't be kind of we're definitely going to be looking for an appointee who's not going to run. And then there's Rosie Castro.
Yeah.
And I think, Marina Gavito, she says she's not going to seek the appointees, the interim appointment. in part, I think that's just simple pragmatism. Mm-hmm. It takes a ton of time to run for office. Yeah. And I mean, sure, you can leverage your interim appointment and kind of do both at the same time, but it's a little bit scuzzy. Mm-hmm. Nobody would think that was fair.
Yeah. Having had some experience working with a politician who had pledged not to run for an office that she was appointed to, I think, it really, truly is a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. And it's symbolic, but it's also substantive. I mean, it's symbolic because, as you said, Rosie ran in 1971 and they lost, and and she said we'll be back. Yeah. And then she has these two.
Took a while.
But then Julian, that was he's in that seat,
that's exactly right.
For the circle to fully be closed and her to be serving in that seat. Mm-hmm. But it's also substantive because she's going to have 4 months of actually voting, actually doing some policy. And for everything that Greg and you and Nancy have said about her that makes it frankly a no-brainer, with all due respect to other people who want to be appointed and who have said that they may not seek the seat. It's just that there's some things aren't always equal. And when you have this choice of and Rosie is 75, I think.
That's right.
In fact, she'll be 76 the day after the elections. It's a no-brainer, and there's no excuse for holding this up.
Yeah. And frankly, I mean, with interim appointees, and I think we saw this with Mike Gallagher. So much is handled by the existing council staff. Mm. So I mean, you need an office holder, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you need somebody answerable to voters. But I mean, staff can keep things running.
Sure.
And to the extent, there's hardly ever what you could really call a lame duck period. But with city council in the run up to a city election, you tend to find fewer kind of controversial issues popping up and really blowing up at council. So, I mean, I just question what huge issues city council is going to be handling in the next 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah. Something that Diego Bernal had tweeted about Anna, and he just said, disclaimer, I haven't spoken with Councilwoman Sandoval. This isn't based on any statement she's made, but it was inspired by her. I just thought it was really interesting. So he says an average cost of childcare in Texas for an infant is $9,324 a year, $777 a month. And for a 4-year-old, it is $589 a month. And then the average salary of in San Antonio is $42,000. Council person's average salary, $45,000.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
I mean, that is a really pragmatic. I mean, she needs childcare, and she's a single mom, and babies are expensive, and so I think this new opportunity for her will be a good one for that reason as well.
Yeah, and she talked about it. I mean, she's as someone, she's 47. She's a single mom. She's basically become the primary caregiver when it comes to her mother since her father passed away 14 months ago. And so she's got some pretty heavy burdens at this point in her life. And I think she said that the financial considerations were part of it. And there are a lot of other issues going on in the city right now. And obviously it's not something that's going to come up real soon. But I do think that it would not be a bad idea for the city to revisit the council pay issue. We've made some great progress in, I can't remember if it was 2017 or 2015, the year that they passed, that they approved council pay and got us 2015, when they got us to the 45,000. That was it was a really positive step. And, but I think that we'd be better, given the size of the city, how big the districts are.
The workload of it.
yeah.
I mean, they're always, I feel like how often do they have meetings? It's like, feels like every day.
Between their committees and stuff, yeah.
Committees and
session on
meetings.
Wednesdays, the regular session Thursdays, and then they've got all of the city council committees
Yeah.
where they actually make the policy.
Yeah.
It's a very active council.
Yeah, and each council member has 2 to 3 committee appointments apart from their regular meetings.
Yeah.
So, and with regards to the choice that Anna has made, everyone's talking about the political calculations everyone else is making, but ultimately it comes down to us everyone should be able to say good for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And congratulations.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And it's well deserved. I mean,
Yeah.
she's been about health equity and done, I mean, during COVID, during all that, she was very instrumental in working, and she's worked really hard for her district. And so I think that she deserves it. And I know that probably the council as a whole it just seems like there's news, talk about workload, but news every single day. It feels like another shakeup there. And this is one of them, but this is a different one. This is something different.
And District 7 has kind of it is really produced some sort of political stars in this area. I mean, we had Ed Garza went from District 7 council member to mayor. Julian went from District 7 to mayor. Justin Rodriguez became a state representative and then a county commissioner. And I think people have always thought that Anna Sandoval, that she also had a chance to become mayor or run for something else. She hasn't closed the door on it. I don't think it's anything that she's going to consider at any time soon. But I don't think she's completely shut the door on possibly running for something down the line.
Like you said, she's young. She's 47.
Right.
So.
Yeah. We mentioned Marina Gavito. There are going to be other candidates in that race. One who already is filed is Dan Rossiter, who's the assistant program manager at Southwest Research Institute. And so he's another candidate we're going to be following. One thing that was interesting to me is we're still, as Greg pointed out, the candidates just started filing beginning last Wednesday, and there will be a lot more names added to the mix in the coming days. But what was interesting is that District 1, we're obviously following Mario Bravo's situation pretty closely, and he had a pretty good fundraising. I'm trying to get the figures. I know it was over $50,000 that he raised. This past
and most of it was in December.
6 months, yeah,
which
which is really telling because I mean he got censured, I believe, it was November,
right?
And so
his fundraising was less than stellar in October and November. It really picked up in December. So
that I think there was a real statement on the part of his donors saying we're standing behind you, and I think him realizing that he was in some political trouble and making a really strong push. And you just see him out there just in the way he's communicating, using the social media. He's been dealing with the St. Mary's issue with the road work. And he's just been very very active in trying to kind of set the table for his reelection. There will be some opposition there. One candidate that kind of caught my attention, Sue Carr, who is an educational consultant. She announced in last fall, and she's already raised more than $41,000 in a fairly short period of time. So I think that's someone who, there's going to be you're going to have to build name recognition, I think, with voters. But I think that, she's going to have a pretty good war chest to help her in that race. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're seeing with an interesting conflict between two Republican members of Congress who both represent San Antonio, and they are Chip Roy and Tony Gonzalez, who we talked about a lot on the podcast. We've had Tony Gonzalez on the podcast. Kevin McCarthy, the new Republican House Speaker, had some skeptics and detractors in his caucus who he had to win over to be able to get elected Speaker. Chip Roy was one of them. And one of the things he agreed to was to fast track a border security bill. Now, Chip Roy has introduced a border security bill, it's HR 29, which would basically state that federal officials, if they can't put migrants who come to the border, they can't put them in detention or send them to Mexico, then they have to be turned away. Many people are interpreting this as just basically obliterating the asylum process. And we've had without getting too deep in the weeds, we've had Title 42, a public health order, which has limited asylum over the past couple of years. But we've still, even within that, we've had room for individualized screenings where we've had unaccompanied children. The Biden administration, as they've continued to use Title 42, have made exceptions for unaccompanied children. There have been individualized screenings where people who are seen as really in serious jeopardy in their home countries have been allowed to apply for asylum and stay in the country. The Chip Roy's bill doesn't allow for that. And so, and it also says that if the federal officials don't comply with what the bill mandates, that states can sue the federal government. Tony Gonzalez is one of several Republicans who have objected to this bill, but he's been, I think, the most outspoken. And since he covers about 800 miles of border territory, I think his voice has been a particularly relevant one on this. And so he's come out publicly and opposed it. What's really interesting is that we've just learned, the Washington Post reported today, Monday, that this bill, which was going to go right to the House floor and for a vote, expected to go for a vote this week, is now going to be sent to committee. It's going to have to go through the Homeland Security Committee, and where it's going to get looked at, dissected. Amendments will be added if it makes it out of the committee. So Kevin McCarthy had given Chip Roy this gift. We're going to fast track this bill for you, get it to the House floor, and now because of pushback within his caucus, he's having to turn that around and say, okay, well, no. Because one of the things that was interesting is Chip Roy himself was one of the people in the House saying, I don't like the way that the process by which bills are getting passed. You know, we don't have people, there's not enough discussion and debate and everything. And there were a few Republicans saying, well, but look what we're doing with this bill. Mm-hmm. Look, we're just going to send it to the floor. Nobody's going to really have a chance to look at this. So anyway, what do you make of the situation?
Well, aside from the hypocrisy of that, or the way
careful what you wish for, right?
Putting that aside,
it's interesting. First of all, that we know that McCarthy doesn't have much room to air when it comes to the Chip Roy, Marjorie Taylor Greene side of the the extreme. Yeah. Even though Roy and Greene were on different sides of supporting him for the speaker. But, so was Roy and Gonzalez. So it's interesting that McCarthy is siding with Tony, who was out front and literally sitting behind him during the early votes. I think that, but looking at just Roy and Gonzalez, I think they are two of the more interesting members of the House of Representatives just because of their beliefs, because Roy is a true believer in all that stuff. Yeah. With him, you know that you follow him on Twitter, you see him on the House floor, sweating up a storm, tie undone, and you know he believes a lot of this. Some of it, I think, just crap. With Gonzalez, he's fascinated me because as a freshman, and now as a two-term congressman, I think he feels that sometimes he has to sing that tune, but his heart isn't into it. And I think it's interesting to see that in this new term, not only with this, when it comes to talking about the humanitarian side of the immigration fight with regards to Roy's bill, but the fact that he was the only Republican who voted against the rules changes when it comes to leadership and everything. I think this is going to be an ongoing and escalating feud between these two congressmen who represent us, and one will be illuminating just how radical the other one is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tony Gonzalez is interesting in that, with what appears to be the Speaker McCarthy's concession to now send this bill through the committee. It's who knows how much Tony Gonzalez actually had to play, had to play in that. But he looks like the kind of lawmaker a House Speaker would want to nurture in advance. Mm-hmm. So he's Hispanic Republican.
Good for it. Absolutely.
And he's really kind of developing himself as a national security foreign policy expert. In the olden days, they would put him, he would be very prominent within the Republican caucus, and his career would be advancing. And like, maybe it's too much to think that McCarthy recognizes a talent that, the party needs to cultivate if they're going to, ultimately succeed in Congress. Anybody who appoints Marjorie Taylor Greene to Homeland Security, though, you kind of question whether they're thinking along those lines. Yeah. But maybe, in the olden days, like 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, maybe a House Speaker would do that. Yeah. Would they do that now? I don't know. But he is, he's a talent, and you would think that they would want to advance it. And I think McCarthy does. I think McCarthy's walking that tightrope of like, if he loses, Roy and some of the others, I guess basically there were 20 people who he had to kind of win over with various promises. If he loses those people, he's in big trouble. Yeah. But at the same time, his inclinations would probably be to cultivate people like Tony Gonzalez and develop them as the voice of the Republican Party more so than people like Chip Roy and Marjorie Taylor Greene. But he's kind of at the same. They're the ones who have him over a barrel.
Roy is an ideologue. Whatever you want to think about McCarthy, he's not an ideologue, and Gonzalez isn't an ideologue. Yeah.
No, I think Gonzalez, if anybody's walking a tightrope, it is Gonzalez. Yeah. He's constantly, I would hope, he tweeted something, it was on the 15th, and it was a picture of little girls. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little girls. Yeah. And it kind of gave me some hope that maybe he'll be compassionate in all of this. And I think, that's where this tweet was going, I feel like. And I think it was about this.
It was about the Roy bill.
It was about this stuff. Yeah. But he didn't say it. Yeah. But he put the picture of them. They're out there in the dirt. And he said a cartel dumped the babies in the field. But then he said, does denying them rescue make our border any more safe or secure? And so I would hope that he would just have more compassion, right, and to try to form policy that, and I know it's going to be almost impossible, right, looking at our history, but to try to form some kind of policy that is more compassionate. And I know it's difficult for Tony being Republican and everything being so divided and divisive and everything.
Some of the challenges in his district where you got, El Paso, for example, they've been, trying to deal with just so many people coming in and how they're going to.
It's hard, right? Because you have to balance those things.
But it's shrewd, even though the way. Just using that picture the way that Nancy said, without. He was throwing shade. Yeah. And so just putting that picture out there and just letting it stand. It's a shrewd move.
It is.
I think
it was important. It says a lot about where he stands.
Yeah. The action that's happening within the Republican caucus over the next 2 years is just going to be really fascinating. A little different. We saw it with the Tea Party and John Boehner struggling to deal with that, and we've seen some iterations of this. But I think this is going to be
another
different.
level.
Yeah, it's another level. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Going to have a lot more news on the city council races and other things. State legislature will probably we haven't talked a lot about that, and we'll dive deeper into that in the coming weeks. Thank you all for listening. Hope you all are doing well, and take care. We'll be back next week.